I hope you're enjoying this service. If you're watching this on Sunday morning, then this is part of our usual WhatsApp service that we're developing as part of our worshipping pattern, community life together during the lockdown that we're experiencing because of coronavirus. I'm aware it's not perfect and it's not going to work for everybody. If you've got ideas or thoughts, then please let us know. Tried to fix a couple of things from last week, trying to use a fewer messages and trying to also deal with the reflections that you've picked up from my glasses. I hope it's a bit better today. It's proven quite a tricky thing to fix completely, but hopefully we'll find a way around that and that these things aren't too distracting. Let's take a moment of quiet. So just press pause on the video for a moment and pray for God to speak to you through his word. Amen. Familiar, of course, many of us, with the child's cry, "Are we nearly there yet?" Something I remember saying a lot when I was a child as we undertook long drives from one part of the UK to another in the holidays. And if you've got children or been around children, I'm sure you all have heard it if you've taken any sort of long or even medium length journey with them. Are we nearly there yet? We're only a few days into what at the moment is scheduled to be 21 days of lockdown here in South Africa. But even a few days into it, some of us may already be feeling something like that. Are we nearly there yet? And that's understandable. We're suddenly thrust into this odd, destabilizing experience where so many of the things that we depend on and are safe for us are removed or limited in some way. And we just want it to be over. And that's a very human experience, and it's okay to do that. It's okay to feel that. I would encourage us all to, when we feel that, to stop and to notice that feeling and to name it, to try and understand what it is we have a sense of losing in this present time, in this present season, and to give ourselves permission to grieve that loss. We looked at death and loss in Lent last year, and with Arthur we reflected on the idea of the losses that aren't so much the death of a person, but are the losses of opportunities or situations of health or of whatever it could be. And we're all experiencing losses at this time, so notice them and grieve them, and it's okay. And it's okay to do that. And one of the signals of it could be, "Are we nearly there yet? When is this over?" Because actually, God's people are people who live in the now. If we are all the time longing for this to be over, and more than the longing, looking forward into the time when it will all be over, we miss a lot of things, and we don't do the deep work in ourselves and that is necessary in this present moment, and we will miss what God is saying and doing in us now. Jesus said famously, "Consider the lilies." If you're going to consider the lilies, if you're going to stop to smell the flowers, as we said a couple of weeks ago, then you've got to stop to do it now, not thinking about the future. I want to read to you a famous passage from Isaiah chapter 40, where God says, "Comfort, comfort my people, says your God. Speak tenderly to Jerusalem and proclaim to her that her hard service has been completed, that her sin has been paid for, that she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. A voice of one calling, in the wilderness prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be raised up, every mountain and hill made low. The rough ground shall become level, the rugged places a plain, and the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all people will see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. Isaiah 41-5. The thing I want us to note today from that little passage in Isaiah 40 is a passage of comfort. And God doesn't say to his people just, it's going to be all right in the end, this will all be over. But he says, prepare the way for the Lord in the wilderness. In the wilderness, prepare a way for the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. We're in Lent, of course, and it's a time when we reflect on Jesus in the wilderness. We reflect on exile and exodus. And God is saying to his people through Isaiah, you can meet me now in the desert. Yes, there is a future to prepare for, but you prepare for that future by meeting with God, preparing a way for him here and now. I suppose it comes down to this: the present is not simply a waiting room for the future. The present is where we meet God, and it is, by definition, the space in which we are prepared for whatever lies ahead. We don't know how long this lockdown is going to last. The government has told us 21 days, but of course we know that is a minimum, and it may be extended. And we also don't know, even if it does last 21 days, we don't know how things will be when it's over. We don't know how we will be as individuals, and we don't know what our communities and our cities and our country will feel like and be like. So whilst we may have plans and ideas for when this is all over, they're made without a precise knowledge of how things will be. And the way we prepare for an unknown future is by meeting God now and preparing to meet him now in this desert exile experience. Now, lest we think that makes it easy for us, it doesn't. Meeting God doesn't mean that the desert gets any more bearable, perhaps. But it does mean that we encounter him now. And in encountering him, he does work in us now that prepares us for whatever's next. And whilst we may have a sense of whatever's next, he, the eternal God, who sees the beginning from the end, he is the one that knows what is next, and who in the present moment does work in us now and also prepares us for the future. So let's be careful about, are we nearly there yet, when this is all over? It's not entirely bad, of course, but let's limit ourselves and focus on, where are we now? What are we doing now? How are we preparing to meet with God now? Because that is what will ultimately prepare us for whatever is in the future. A couple of thoughts about how to do that. Create a grace-filled structure for your day. And I say grace-filled because these structures could easily become rigid and a burden to us. Referred to them last week. But just create something that gives you a structure to your day that enables you to understand what you're going to do next. Continue to perhaps set your alarm to get up at a certain time. This is when I read, this is when I watch something on TV, this is when I have some silence, etc., etc. And note the things that are good and that give you life in this season, and note the things that are hard. And use those things to shape what you do. Try to discern with God if something is hard, if it's something that you shouldn't do, or it's hard because you're unfamiliar with it, and perhaps with God's help you can push through it. In this season, don't be too hard on yourself. I've alluded to before, I think, what my therapist said to me once, my therapist, I don't think he's a Christian, but he's a very wise man. And he said to me of my capacity to see the worst in myself and to talk to myself, say things about myself that are very destructive. He said, do you think the Jesus you preach about would speak to you the way that you do? And I think some of us will need to hear that. You know, we see others saying, Shakespeare wrote King Lear during a plague. Paul wrote the New Testament from prison, some of the New Testament from prison. Well, that's great. And I love every single one of us, but with all due respect to every single one of us, I don't think either of us are Paul the Apostle or Shakespeare. Be kind to yourself. You don't have to create a masterpiece or learn a new language in this season. Create a pattern of reading and prayer and worship that helps you. It might not have to be one that helps other people or that other people are doing and are trumpeting on Facebook or on phone calls or WhatsApp messages or whatever it is. Create a space that works for you. One of the ways a Christian church often does this is times of silence. Silence is a time when we press pause on our minds and our activism and on the thoughts that fill us, and allow God's presence to consciously come in us and through us. Maybe we would want to set an alarm that reminds us on the hour just to take 30 seconds of stillness and quiet. And then a week later make it 45 seconds. 2 weeks later, a minute, and so on. I think of God coming to Elijah after the prophets of Baal, when Elijah has this extraordinary encounter with God, and God is victorious on the mountaintop. And Elijah melts down completely and runs off into the desert. He is suicidal, and he falls asleep. And God, through angels, wakes him up. And God doesn't say, here's how you should pray in this time. He doesn't say, here's a few books you should read or whatever. God says, eat and sleep, for the journey is too much for you. That may be how God comes to you. Very simple. Eat, sleep, for the journey is too much for you. God may come to you more like he comes to Moses in a burning bush or in some ecstatic revelatory experience. But don't dismiss God coming to you saying, eat, sleep, rest, silence, for the journey is too much for you. Because God knows what you need now to experience him today and to prepare you for what lies ahead. I encourage us all as part of the St. Peter's community to examine what God is doing in us, in you, in me now, so that we might be ready for the future and for when this is all over. A question to think about and to discuss if you're with other people, to pray about now and in the future over the next week or so. How can I prepare for and encounter God's presence now? What does it mean for me in this strange season of world events and my own life? What does it mean for me to prepare for and encounter God's presence now? And what little things can I do to help me do that? So now this video is finished, just press stop on the video and think and chat and pray about that for a few minutes.